there's been footage now that has been verified of Ukrainian border guards who actually caught several men of conscription age who were attempting to flee the country. Each of them had paid 10,000 euros to actually escape Ukraine. Ukrainian border guards caught them and beat them actually on camera. We can play some of that you can see here. I mean, it's just really brutal treatment, as you guys can see, like being dragged out, thrown on the ground, being beaten up, being harangued there at the border. And it is just illustrative of the desperate conditions that a lot of the people in the country now feel as the war continues to not doing very well. And I think that, you know, this reality is beginning to sink in for a lot of people. The CIA director actually just yesterday testified. He's like, well, you know, without U.S. aid, we're going to see a lot more of the falls of Advika. But the irony is that the reason that we have to give more aid is that then maybe in 2025, they can change the status quo. I mean, the status quo, you can't change the fact that you have a population that doesn't particularly want to fight, as evidenced here. Most of those who did want to fight are either dead or now maimed. The average age is some 48, 50 years old. In the Ukrainian military, they've been unable to adopt Western-style tactics successfully. What they can do is to employ a massive amount of artillery ammunition. Here's the problem. We literally don't produce even 1/3 the entire West of what Russia can do in a single year. I mean, all of the odds are stacked against them. And the fundamentals of the conflict have been basically the same from day one. F-16s, Krystal, as you'll remember, the only thing that I think more aid would do now at this point is have the Ukrainians be in such a risky position that they would get us involved. And we're starting to see some of this. The Czechs, the French, the Poles are all trying to normalize now the idea that NATO troops should have to go in on the ground, which of course is full-blown World War III. Yeah. That's their plan, what they have right now.
Otherwise, I mean, they don't
have a shot.
Prayer of victory. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, we've seen the way that there's been this escalation from the beginning of the Ukraine war of all these red lines that were drawn about, you know, what we would and wouldn't send. And we just keep, you know, walking by them. And eventually you get to the point where the only thing left is, all right, you need troops because you don't have enough fighting men left or willing. So I guess we're going to come in and do that as well, which is why you really can't just hand wave away some of the things that Emmanuel Macron in particular has been saying. You know, I mean, this video is, I think it's really important for a number of reasons. Number one, it underscores the fact that even though I'm sure that if you ask Ukrainians, like, do you want to keep, you know, in theory fighting and reclaim your land, you're going to get an overwhelming yes. But when you ask Ukrainians, are you personally at this point willing to risk your life in service of that goal? The answer is increasingly no. It also underscores the fact, you know, these men had paid a significant amount of money to try to avoid the draft. And this was something that we had talked about before, the fact that, you know, there is a significant corruption problem in Ukraine. So those who have been able to pay, who have the money, have by and large been able to escape fighting in the war. And so it's left to the poor and those without the means or the political connections who are sent into this meat grinder. And increasingly, you're running out of those as well. So as much as the, you know, military weapon issue is acute for Ukraine, the manpower issue is at least as acute for Ukraine. I think that is, you know, part of what comes out in this video.
I've said this too. I saw it personally. I was in Budapest and in Vienna. There are Ukrainians everywhere. It's a joke. Like the tour guides joke about it. They're like, oh, by the luxury hotels, they're like, look at all these Ukrainian plates. There was a joke in Vienna that every strip club in the city has been packed full for 2 years by all these rich Ukrainian dudes who don't want to fight and are filthy rich. I mean, at a certain point, you can't judge them because they paid their way out and they don't want to, but it's more one of those where it's like, really? This is such an open secret in all of Europe, and yet here, and especially in Central Europe, but over here, like we have a fantasy version of this conflict. You also see the continued descent is completely crushed no matter where it comes from. Let's put this up there on the screen. The recent target of Ukrainian propaganda is the Pope, who has provoked outrage for saying that Ukraine should have the courage to, quote, raise the white flag and end the war with Russia. I should also be clear, he didn't actually specify that Ukraine should be the one, but he said that people should have the courage to, quote, raise the right flag and to end the war in order to stop the suffering, to which the Ukrainian foreign minister said, our flag is a yellow-blue one. This is the flag by which we will live, die, and we will prevail. We shall never raise any other flags. And Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky said that the pontiff was, quote, engaging in virtual mediation, and that they support us with the prayer and their beliefs, but this is indeed what a church with the people is. Not 2,500 kilometers away somewhere, mediation between someone who wants to live and who wants to destroy you. We've also seen, let's put this next one up there, that there are now Ukrainian propaganda accounts that are tarnishing the Pope in a Russian-made flag, as if that's going to be a popular strategy all across Europe and for a lot of the people who have been calling for peace in Ukraine. But it just demonstrates, Krystal, how unhinged the discourse remains. I mean, it's just a basic concept floated there by the Pope, and he was like almost immediately crushed. You actually see some of this too whenever he talks about Israel and Gaza as well. So not necessarily surprised, but it does show you how crazy the rhetoric that remains inside Ukraine is, and it does not match any of the actions that anyone with the eyes can see.
The foreign minister of Ukraine seemed to equate the Pope's position here to Nazi collaboration in the last century. He said, first of all, he called on Francis to stand on the side of good and not put Russia and Ukraine on the same footing and call it negotiations. He also appeared to refer to collaboration between some of the Catholic Church and Nazi forces during the Second World War. Quote, at the same time, when it comes to the white flag, we know this Vatican strategy from the first half of the 20th century. I urge to avoid repeating the mistakes of the past and to support Ukraine and its people in their just struggle for their lives. The reality is, if we had actually cared about the Ukrainian people, we would not have short-circuited those negotiations early on. Obama actually had warned Biden back during his administration not to overpromise the Ukrainians, knowing the limits of what our support could do. But we, again, engaged in this delusional and very arrogant view that said, oh, we can keep our hands clean and just, ship some weapons that'll be good for our economy. The military-industrial base will love it, and we'll be able to destroy Russia. We're going to use our economic sanctions, et cetera. None of that has gone the way that they thought it would, least of all the sanctions. At this point, we threw Russia is like the most sanctioned country on the planet. We threw our entire playbook at them and basically gave a preview of how limited the efficacy of those sanctions actually is. So way to go, guys. Great strategy.
Yeah, it's totally shocking, and yet very little changing there in terms of the status quo. Perhaps reality will eventually set in, but it is not today.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.